If anyone knows when Shohei Ohtani will pitch for the Dodgers, they're not saying. But that doesn't mean we can't make some educated guesses, so that's what we're going to do.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks to our everydayers for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and thanks to those of you who are with us live here on Thursday evening. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. So please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. If this is your first time with us, my name is Jeff Snyder. And that guy next to me is my co-host, Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like most of you. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And today, we're going to talk about why the Dodgers are slow playing Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher this year and what we think their priorities are. And then in the second segment, we know the Dodgers don't want to be buyers at the trade deadline, but they might need to be. So we'll look at some potential acquisitions. And finally, in the third segment, we'll answer a listener question about potential changes to the pitcher win statistic in light of Yoshinobu Yamamoto getting robbed of a win in his gym the other night. But first, let's get into Shohei as the pitcher. Vince, Shohei Ohtani has been, he's been through a bullpen session. What was that, last August, September?
Yeah.
You first took video of him in the bullpen at Dodger Stadium. There was talk last year. Bill Plaschke wrote a whole article about why Ohtani should be the Dodgers closer in October last year. Obviously, the shoulder surgery on his non-throwing shoulder slowed everything down this offseason. But still, even with all that factored in, the Dodgers are really taking their time on getting Shohei back, and I think they got some specific reasons.
You would hope so. I mean, realistically, it's a matter of, one, they can do it, even though they're getting real pushed to those limits right now in terms of having enough healthy arms to – and then, Bryan mentioned that they have healthy arms, but then those guys got hurt, and then the other people that are trying to make up for it, maybe that's the reason why they got hurt. So, there's a different way. But I'm still under the impression that last year, if they would have needed Ohtani, like if the series would have been closer from the start, at least the World Series. Like if the World Series would have been 2-2, I think Ohtani would have thrown at one point, but at least an inning. But yeah, for now, it's one of those things where they can do it. That's the main reason they're doing it. The second reason is they're hoping this preserves health and that you can keep them into the later part of the season and the postseason, because you don't need them so much in April and May and June. You need them more in September, October.
Yeah, and I think, I think that hits on – I think they have two priorities, and one more important than the other. I think their top priority with Ohtani is having him available to pitch whatever they need in October, which means they don't need him to pitch in big league games until at least August and maybe even September, in order to be ready to, if he started beginning of September, got 4 or 5 starts in, he'd be ready to be a bona fide starter in October if that's what they needed from him. If they decide that they want his role to be different, if he's just a 3-inning starter with a piggybacker, then that's even easier. They'd want him to be the starter. He's going to have to be either a starter or a closer because of the Shohei Ohtani rule. Because and even a closer would be dangerous, because if he blew a save, then potentially they could lose him in extra innings or whatever as a hitter. But as a starter, he could be a piggybacker and he's only going to throw 2 or 3 innings, but he'll do it at the beginning of a game. I think October is their top priority, but I think the secondary priority that also is at least on their minds is, I think they want to pitch at least 20 innings this year so that he is qualified as a two-way player next year automatically, and they don't have a waiting period, which, we thought they were going to have a waiting period this year, and then we found out that they had quietly changed the rule without telling anybody to be the last 2 years. And so he does need to throw 20 innings this year, or else MLB is going to have to quietly change the rule again.
Yeah, he seemed to have ramped up, at least the fact that he's throwing bullpens, the fact that he was throwing sliders. He threw a 50-pitch bullpen the other day. He's seemingly ramping up. My initial thought, and they're getting close to that not necessarily being a legitimate thought anymore, was to have him pitch before before the end of July. So at least early to mid July, just to see one, what he's got, two, are they going to need to supplement this rotation with another arm? And if some of these other injuries linger, or just prepping for potential injury, whatever it was, they could still do that. I mean, if he threw a 50-pitch bullpen the other day, that means he could seemingly face hitters in the next 2 weeks if they were fast playing it. And then, you go from there, and he'd be throwing simulated games or actual games where he probably would have a piggyback, something like that. So I still kind of have that in the back of my mind as what they're going to think about, especially with, you don't know when you're going to get Blake Snell back. Glasnow seems to be back in June, but at some point you kind of need to see what you do have in order to see what you need to get.
Yeah. The tricky thing is, because he's a hitter, he can't go on a rehab assignment. I mean, they could send him on a rehab assignment and just lose his bat for, a week or whatever. They're not going to want him to go on a traditional starting pitcher rehab assignment where he makes 3 or 4 starts in the minors, because that's way too long, to be without his bat in the big league lineup. And so they do have to figure it out on the fly. Mark in the chat doesn't think 4 or 5 starts is enough to have confidence in him October. And maybe that's right. Maybe they would want more than that. I've kind of been thinking August, give him 2 months. It really is a balancing act, but I think a month and definitely 2 months is plenty to see, okay, is this guy one of our best options in October? And even if they waited till September, did 4 or 5 starts, I think that would be enough to identify, okay, here's the sweet spot where we want him, if they were considering doing a piggyback, because they do have so many starting pitchers. If everybody gets healthy, you might run into a case where, how do you decide between Yamamoto and Glasnow and Snell and Ohtani and, Kershaw and Roki and May and Gonsolin? And, I've always kind of dreamed of a situation where they had too many starters in October and they did have to go to piggybacks and say, all right, well, this game, our goal is to only use one relief pitcher because Shohei Ohtani and Clayton Kershaw are throwing 8 innings between the two of them. So far in my life, because I've been a Dodger fan my whole life, they've never had an entirely healthy pitching staff in October. And so I don't necessarily expect that this year, but so much of this will be determined by what does the state of the health of the Dodgers rotation look like?
Yeah, because realistically, if everyone's healthy, at best, Ohtani is your number 3 starter. He's behind Yamamoto. He's behind Blake Snell. And, even with Glasnow at his peak, he's probably behind Glasnow. And then if Ohtani is your number 4 starter, then there's ways to work around it where, like, the first series, you might not even need a number 4 starter. In the second series, if you do need a number 4 starter, it's only once. And, and then, it might work out where days, if a 7-game series in the World Series, you could need it twice. But, realistically, Ohtani bookmarked as a number 4 starter in October. You don't need to see him that many times. He's either good or he's not. And if he's not good, obviously it would cost you in the moment, but you could easily just not pitch him again, because you are going to have your normal amount of pitchers already. Ohtani's just kind of the bonus baby there in the pitching staff. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of question marks. I see some people saying here, like, don't even risk him pitching at all, but I don't see the reason for that. He's had Tommy John and still hit. Like, it's not going to affect him that way. Realistically, the only way it would affect him is, if he gets injured somewhere else, that's, leg, hamstring, something like that. But you could also do that running, and then you're getting to a point of, well, what was the point of getting him? Obviously, he's a great hitter. He's proving his value that way, but I still want to see a pitch.
Yeah, I do too. My brother is firmly in the camp of he doesn't want Ohtani to pitch because of the risk to him, being in the lineup. And you could picture, if he did come back in August and did blow out his arm again in September, and then he couldn't hit in October because, even when he's hit with Tommy John surgery, that was after, an off season of at least starting the rehab, recovering from the surgery. I don't know if he could hit if he blew out his elbow. I don't know.
Hasn't he hit already? Didn't he get surgery like a month after he got hurt last year or 2 years ago? I'm pretty sure he did.
I thought that because hadn't they already shut him down because of like a oblique injury or something. So and then he had the Tommy John or the whatever this latest surgery is that they refused to put a name on. I think they did that after he was already shut down because of his oblique injury. So I don't think he's actually hit with a blown out arm, but I don't remember for sure. And I'm sure they have a better handle on this than we do. But yeah, I don't think the Dodgers, I don't think they'd be going through the motions of having him be throwing these bullpen sessions if they weren't planning on him pitching. The only question is, how much are they planning on him pitching? And that's where it comes down to, I think the priorities are help us win a World Series and qualify as a two-way player for next year so that we have all our options available next year.
Yeah.
Speaking of, starting pitching, bullpen, all those things, obviously the Dodgers don't want to be buyers at the trade deadline, but they might need to be. So we will look at some potential trade deadline acquisitions. So please keep it locked on Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have way more ways than ever to play smart and win big. One of the interesting things going on right now in the NBA playoffs, if you look at the odds to actually win the NBA title, the Thunder are the overwhelming favorite right now at minus 310. And obviously the Timberwolves are the overwhelming underdog at plus 2,000. That's because they are plus 100 to even make it to the finals, plus 1,100. Is that what I said? To even make it to the finals because they're down 2-0 against the Thunder in their conference finals. So you think the Wolves have a comeback in them? Put a little money on that. Plus 2,000. That's some good odds. And, a lot of things, depend on how risky you are. But the fun thing is, if you're a new customer to FanDuel, you make a $5 bet. And if you win, then you get $200 in bonus bets, which you could then use to put on something a little bit more risky, like the Minnesota Timberwolves to win the NBA title. So again, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, we are back. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being every day, or if you are, thanks for being here live with us. If you're not an everyday, it's easy to become one. Just watch or listen every weekday morning. Obviously, you can make that easier on yourself by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening right now. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. You can text directly with us, have one-on-one conversations with us, and get access to our exclusive Insider Discord server where you can talk Dodgers with other Locked On Dodgers fans. It's just a few bucks a month with a free 14-day trial. And for your second listen, be sure to check out Locked On MLB, hosted by our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. So, Vince, the Dodgers, obviously they're not going to be sellers at the trade deadline. They don't really want to be buyers. We talked yesterday about how Andrew Friedman said a few months ago during the offseason that his goal is to not have to buy at the trade deadline because prices are inflated there all the time. And I said yesterday, I think he's mostly probably referring to relief pitchers because that's where the inflation is the highest. But just anywhere in general, like their goal building this roster was to build out a roster that they don't need to add pieces to. Unfortunately, injuries happen, ineffectiveness happens, and it's easy to see a couple places on this team at least where 2 months from now, as we're getting close to the trade deadline, the Dodgers might have some holes they need to fill. So I thought we'd just dig in and talk about a couple possibilities of who they might get and why they might need them, Vince.
Yeah, it's we're far along enough to where you can start looking at teams that are really, really bad. And usually if teams are really, really bad, they may not have too much to offer. You look at the Pirates, you look at the White Sox, you look at the Rockies. I talked about Ryan McMahon. I don't necessarily think he's a fit, but, if he continues to hit the way he's hit in May, that obviously changes things a little bit. You look at the Pirates, and, I know Paul Skeens trade scenarios have run rampant the last couple of days, but, realistically, they're not going to trade him now. And you look at the rest of them, Bryan Reynolds, the guy that we've talked about before in the past, he hasn't been good this year. Don't know if a change of scenery is one of the things he needs. You look at the White Sox, Luis Roberts, obviously there. He's had a hot week or two a couple weeks ago. So there's different guys there. But yeah, I mean, realistically, they're probably going to be looking at one offensive position, whether it's just a guy that can hit and they can fill him in, or a guy that can hit and just hit off the bench. And then, they'll probably be looking at a starter and a reliever. Even if everyone's healthy, they'll still be looking. They may not make the deal, but they'll still be looking.
Yeah, they'll be in the market for sure. Like you said, even if it's just to drive up prices for other teams like they do in free agency. Obviously, the hope is that guys will get healthy, and a lot of it will come down to what they've figured out health-wise about these guys by July. Like we were talking about in the Ohtani segment, that if they, by July, 2 months from now, we might know Blake Snell, when he's coming back or if he's coming back, and if they end up with bad news on a couple of these guys, then it might be, oh yeah, maybe we do need to go after the Jack Flaherty and get somebody, whether it's Chris Bassett, who's having a good season and is a free agent at the end of the year, or a handful of other starting pitchers on the relief pitcher.
Old friend.
Who that?
Andrew Heaney, old friend.
Andrew Heaney. Yeah. I think all the home runs he gave up with the Dodgers and the Lance Lynn in the postseason, probably a lot of Dodger fans gun shy on the Andrew Heaney experiment.
You would hope it'd be an innings eater to get through the season, not a guy that you're counting on.
Yeah.
But
which interestingly enough, is basically the role that Jack Flaherty played last year. He actually, he pitched. He had a couple of good games at the postseason. He also had a couple of clunkers. His big value to the team was getting them through the regular season with other guys who could, he saved the bullpen at least, and then the bullpen came up big in the postseason. Mark says, find me a Chris Martin type. Can I interest you in an actual Chris Martin? He's a free agent after this year. He's got a 1.83 ERA this year with the Rangers, who aren't very good, or probably be open to trading him. He came over. He was great with the Dodgers when they got him in 2022 at the trade deadline. There's actually a lot of old friends who are going to be free agents after this year. On the relief pitcher side, Ryan Brazier, Kenley Jansen, who's that other one that I said? Oh yeah, Craig Kimbrell, guys like that. But realistically, if they were going to get a reliever, I feel like it would have to be somebody a little more under the radar, not a huge name, because the prices are so high. Even Chris Martin might be too high profile, because the Rangers might, they recognize relief pitching is at a premium. Dad Braves. Mike says, Joe Kelly on speed dial. Yeah, Joe Kelly is still technically a free agent. Speaking of free agents, and this isn't a trade deadline acquisition, but maybe it's the best place to bring it up. Somebody was asking me today about David Robertson, and I didn't realize he's still a free agent. And it's kind of wild. He turned down a $7 million mutual option with the Rangers to become a free agent, and so maybe he is waiting on a big enough deal that it justifies what he turned down. But I was thinking about him as a fit for the Dodgers today, just because even though like JP Fireeyes, Noah Davis, and Ryan Ludus, and whoever else
Gomez before,
whoever else there is, specifically those guys though, because they have options. And I think the Dodgers value that they can run them out there and then send them back to Oklahoma City and replace them. And then you've got a guy like Lou Trevino who doesn't have options because he's a veteran, and there's a different dynamic there. And that's the role that David Robertson would be in. Obviously, hopefully he'd be good enough, but even then it's like, I picture David Robertson maybe replacing Luis Garcia on the roster, except David Robertson has never been a multi-inning reliever, whereas Luis Garcia, yes, he's bad, but at least he could be bad for multiple innings at a time. I didn't mean to make it sound like I was saying bad to the bone, but that's how it came out. Bad. But at least Luis Garcia can be bad for multiple innings at a time, whereas David Robertson, unfortunately, sometimes there's value in being bad for 3 innings over being good for 1 inning when you do have an overworked bullpen. And then you have the fact that the Dodgers theoretically have relief pitchers coming back and wouldn't want to invest what it's going to cost to get David Robertson, only to have him cause a logjam on the roster if guys do come back. I don't know if they would avoid it for that reason, but it's interesting to me that he's still a free agent. And since I have no idea why he's a free agent, I have no idea if he would fit on the Dodgers,
Yeah, you don't know if he's asking to get, beat what he turned down. You don't know if he's asking to be a closer. You don't know if he's asking or waiting. He could just be waiting like, hey, I'm old. I would love to just play half a season and go pick my team of a contender who wants me at that moment and, go from there.
But imagine all the potential puns when Dave Roberts comes out and make a pitching change. They can say, David Roberts is going to get his son,
Yeah, but there's still – there's going to be a lot of names that emerge. Obviously,
let's talk about the non-pitching side a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, offensively, Luis Robert Jr. is going to be the big one that'll kind of still be the name. Bryan Reynolds will be there. They'll be, realistically, Bo Bichette is still, I guess, someone that could go out there, even though the Blue Jays are playing pretty well right now. I've seen Taylor Ward's name put out there from the Angels, even though I think he can start arbitration, or he has one more year of arbitration after this or something like that. And, the Angels probably won't trade with the Dodgers. But, yeah, I mean, there's guys out there, and there'll probably be a few more that emerge as time goes on. Like, even not stick with the Pirates, but, does Andrew McCutchen value staying with the Pirates? Or if he got a chance to come to L.A., would he do that? I don't know.
Yeah. McCutchen would be the outfield situation is so interesting right now anyway. I don't know that McCutchen is a huge upgrade over what the Dodgers currently have right now. He's not.
I'm thinking like a David Freese type. You're probably not going to play, but a bat off the bench.
Yeah, potentially. I wonder if they were going for a position player, if it might be somebody more under the radar, like a Luis Rengifo type. Again, you mentioned obviously there's complications between the Dodgers and Angels trading. In fact, there's complications specifically with the Dodgers and Angels trading for Luis Rengifo. That's a possibility. He's kind of a utility guy, can play multiple positions. He's doesn't play as many positions lately as he used to, but maybe that's just because they don't have as much need. Rengifo kind of fits that Dodgers mold of kind of player. He's a solid player. He's a free agent at the end of this year. And so he's one who would be intriguing to me.
Cedric Mullins, the one we said before.
Yeah, Cedric Mullins, if they just want to say, you know what, we want Tommy Edman at second base, and so we need a true center fielder, or at least a center fielder against right-handed pitching, whatever it is. There's options there. There's so many names. I'm looking at the list of people who are free agents at the end of this year or potentially. And, obviously Ozzie Albies is on this list. He's not going to be a free agent at the end of this year because the Braves have a $7 million option on him. So he's not actually going to be anywhere near the trade market. And then there's so many. It's like Kevin Biggio. Been there, done that. No thanks. Chris Taylor's on this list. Probably not what the Dodgers are looking for. But because the Dodgers do have so many guys who play multiple positions, you kind of look at any of the positions and say, well, we could just fill a hole. But the more I look at this list, the more I wonder if it would have to be something bigger, like you mentioned, a Taylor Ward type, who's not necessarily a pending free agent, but a guy who the Dodgers are actually getting for a couple years and willing to give up a little bit more to fill a hole. And that, Taylor Ward specifically would be if they just give up on the Michael Conforto experiment. But even then, Cedric Mullins might make more sense if they gave up on the Michael Conforto experiment, because then they could keep Andy Pages in a corner outfield spot. Yeah,
BCS here. How about someone who's actually putting up all-star numbers? We don't know what they need right now in terms of what they're looking for. Yes, if Michael Conforto, you give up on him and you can find a guy that's an all-star outfielder, then they probably go after that. If there's somebody, if Max Muncy's still bad in 2 months and there's an all-star, third baseman or somebody in the infield where they can move other people around, that's probably something to go after. But right now, we're not necessarily looking for starting guys at the moment. Yes, Michael Conforto is bad, but right now they're probably not looking for that. But this is early conversation. In a month, we could be talking about they need a third baseman, they need a left fielder, they need this, they need that, and things will change. They'll be more fluid.
And the other thing that will change is more teams will know whether they have a chance at winning, because that's the other hard part right now in May. People, I see comments all the time, people mad that the Dodgers aren't going and making trades to improve their roster right now. And nobody's trading yet because, what was it last year? When did the Padres get Luis Ariz? 2 years ago?
Last year.
It all runs together. That one happened early because, the Marlins know that they're not going to compete. They knew last year. The Rockies right now absolutely know they're not competing, but the reason they're not competing is because they don't have any good baseball players too. And like I would love to get Ezekiel Tovar, but that's like the one guy who the Rockies aren't going to trade, and everybody else is bad. That's why the Rockies are bad. And so by July, we'll have a better idea, at least a little bit better, who might be open to trading. And then you can start looking at, oh, you've got this good player. He's not a free agent for 3 years, so maybe there's a premium there, but your window of competing is not anytime in the next 3 years. So let's make a deal. So much to dig into. Obviously, as we get closer to the trade deadline, we will talk a lot about potential trades. This is just a few names that, just kind of wet the whistle and, start thinking about what the Dodgers might do this July. Up next, though, we will answer a listener question about potential changes to the pitcher win statistic because of Yoshinobu Yamamoto being robbed of a win in his gem the other night. So please stay locked on Dodgers. Hey, we are back. Thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Thanks for being in every day, or if you are, thanks for being here with us live on Thursday night. No Dodger game today, obviously, and so we appreciate you spending your evening with us instead. You probably weren't sure what to do. Maybe just go to bed early. Nobody got time for that. Watch Locked On Dodgers. So thank you for being here with us. I got a DM on Twitter today from our buddy Doug Reynolds, and he said, "Hey, Jeff, mailbag question. What are your thoughts on the rules for how wins are awarded to pitchers? Feels to me like they are outdated for the modern way a pitching staff is managed now. Sometimes I look at the box score and just think, that's dumb. If you agree, how would #Jeff for Commissioner fix the way that wins, holds, and saves are calculated?" First, let's throw this up here on the banner right now for just a minute. #Jeff for Commissioner. I'm going to entertain this question, Doug. First, I'm going to tell you, if I was commissioner like I should be, the pitcher win statistic would not be anywhere on my radar for revamping. And I'll tell you why. Because the whole point of revamping it will be so that a guy like Yoshinobu Yamamoto could get credit for a win in a game that he pitched well enough to win the other day. But pitchers have been pitching well enough to win and not winning throughout baseball history. It happens more these days because pitchers don't go as deep in games. But I mean, Bert Blyleven took way too long to get in the Hall of Fame because he played on bad offensive teams. And so he had a bunch of games where he pitched well enough to win and didn't win, either lost or got a no decision. And it's, there's a ton of pitchers like that. Some guys who never did make the Hall of Fame because they got robbed of wins. And changing the way it's calculated right now, you would have to either retroactively go back and change it throughout history, and suddenly, Cy Young's 511 wins, how many did he actually have with the new stat and all of that? Or it would create arguments of, well, the stat change. It would make it meaningless. If you change the definition of a stat, especially in baseball, a sport that's kind of obsessed with its stats, if you change the definition of a stat, I think it ends up just making the entire stat meaningless. Don't you think, Vince?
Yeah, I was gonna say Cy Young probably threw complete games a lot of those times, so he probably would still have.
It wouldn't change a lot, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately, and that's kind of the biggest deal with bigger rule changes and rule changes in general. And you can always think about ways of figuring that out. Maybe you create a new stat, EW, earned win, or something like that. And but people, it would take a long time for that to be recognized as anything. And realistically, at this point, wins are not really considered in many things other than, maybe the older generation that still loves to see pitcher wins. Well, they're not really checking for it for Cy Young voting. They're not going to be checking for it for Hall of Fame consideration moving forward. Like Kershaw and Verlander and Scherzer, none of them are going to get to the 300 wins, but they're all going to be in the Hall of Fame. And, that's deserved because they were the best pitchers of their generation. So, yeah, while it sounds good, and while there's things that happen, you kind of think about NFL sometimes where they added an extra game to the season, and maybe that's how people felt when they added the 6 games or 8 games to the season from 154 to 162 back in the day. There's just a lot to get into, but yeah, I mean, wins in general, I don't know how many people really still care about it.
Yeah, and really, realistically, this conversation is why the answer is just stop caring about pitcher wins, because there are much better ways to determine the value of a pitcher, and everybody's using those things. And so win-loss record, yeah, it is kind of a bummer that nobody's ever going to get to 300 wins again. Okay, but only because we're obsessed with that stat, and we can easily adjust that down and say, okay, well, now we understand that getting to 250 is just as impressive, or whatever. If they were going to do one thing, like in this game that we're talking about with Yamamoto the other night, he pitched well enough to win, and the Dodgers won the game. And right now, there's only one time that an official scorer has any say in who gets the win, and that's if the starting pitcher leaves the game with the lead, and the team never relinquishes the lead, but the starting pitcher didn't go at least 5 innings. And then at that point, the official scorer chooses which relief pitcher pitched most effectively and gives the win to that guy. But beyond that, it's always just who's the pitcher of record when your team takes the lead for good, and that's who gets the win. And I guess you could maybe give more leeway so that in a game like the other night, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, 7 scoreless innings. Tanner Scott, 3 runs, only 1 earned, but 3 runs in, or I guess 2 earned, 3 runs in 2 innings, or an inning and 2/3. Anthony Bonda ended up getting the win because he got 1 out. And, I'd be fine if they said, okay, official scorekeeper has the leeway to just give that win to the pitcher who actually deserved it. But in the end, that's another thing where we'd have to go back and say, okay, well, every game in history that a relief pitcher got a win, should that have gone to the starting pitcher, or you would just lose any meaning for that stat, Yeah,
it's tough because you try to not blur the lines between pass and forward, and ultimately, if they did make a rule change and it did happen, we would just have new things to judge people off of moving forward. I did want to just go see Cy Young. He started 815 games in his career and had 749 complete games. So I don't. The most he could have lost was like 50 some wins. So
yeah,
not too bad.
Oh, well, there you have it.
That's the first thing I thought of. Not that it was it's the right idea. Just that guy. I just like, man, he probably never really came out of games.
Yeah, no, yeah, you'd want to be looking at guys later in baseball who pitched for bad teams, or teams with bad bullpens, at least, that blew a bunch of his, there's probably a way to search guys the most often left with a lead and their team won the game, but they didn't get the win. Yeah. And you'd look at some of those. But yeah, ultimately the answer is just stop worrying about pitcher wins. You saw Yamamoto, how happy he was for his teammates after that game. I don't think he cared that he didn't get the win. He already got his 12-year contract. He's got his money. And even if he was going to be going to arbitration or something, the arbitration panel doesn't look at wins and losses. They look at how well you pitched. And so he did everything.
Cy Young winner with the 13-12 record already. So
yep. Yeah. And so if Yamamoto does go 9-7 this year, but he's the best pitcher in baseball, he'll get the Cy Young award probably. Although I did see a ranking list that had him 10th best right now. And, makes me wonder what game they're watching, but what do I know? So you got anything else for today, Vince?
No.
All right. That'll do it for us for today and for this week. Dodgers start a 3-game series on Friday. Who are they playing? Mets, right?
New York Mets.
Yeah, and so that'll be a fun challenge to, obviously a potential postseason matchup, a rematch of last year's NLCS, 2 good teams this year. So it'll be a good time to see if the Dodgers are out of their funk. So we will be back on Sunday night live to talk about that series with the Mets. Obviously, if the Dodgers throw a no-hitter or something, maybe we'll do a bonus episode before then. But can I jinx a no-hitter this early? I guess we'll see. Yeah. But either way, we'll be back with you on Sunday night. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now to make it easy to be an everydayer. Also, be sure to check out the new all new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also go beyond the podcast and become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSense91. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and both of our DMs are open there. You can also email us at lockedondodgers@gmail.com. or send us a voicemail or a text message to 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you on Sunday.
Have a good one.